So the 80th tour in 90 years. This is the route they face as they go up through Brittany and Normandy, heading then across the top of France before they have a long plane trip down to the Alps. Then it's across the bottom through the Languedoc, through the Pyrenees before returning to Paris, 2,200 miles. And now we join the prologue, and this is the pink jersey of Alex Zülle out on the course, the rider who made his first appearance 1 year ago. And he rode so well in the prologue then, he took second place and then moved in to the leader's yellow jersey very shortly after that. Now, is he going to set the time for Miguel Indurain to beat? He's the last rider to go, of course, in the race leader's yellow jersey as defending champion. Zülle now will see the finish here on this very difficult 6.8 kilometres course, and Zülle is going to set the best time. Rolf Sørensen of Denmark, having a great season, was the leader, but now Alex Zülle has set the new mark. 8 minutes, 20.33 seconds. First place for Alex Zülle. So the man who led briefly in the Tour of Spain after his prologue win is in the lead now. This is Tony Rominger, riding only his third Tour de France, riding 131. By the way, all of the numbers that end in 1, they are the numbers given to each team leader. And there are 20 teams in this year's race, 180 riders, and Rominger knows the importance of the prologue. He's on course. This is Erik Breukink in the pink jersey of the Once team. They changed the colours, by the way, for the Tour de France. They normally race in the all-yellow strip. That would confuse with the yellow jersey. Breukink riding the new Lotus bicycle here, very similar to the one that Chris Bourbon rode on the track in last year's Barcelona Games. This is Rominger at the line. Rominger's second best, 8.26. A great ride by Tony Rominger. He's come here with a purpose and he's made a good start. Can Claudio Chiappucci do the same? Well, the devil is on course, so too is the world champion Gianni Bugno. Bugno, who has the talent but so often becomes very involved mentally in a situation and his form disappears. Bugno, for the second year, a world champion, but desperately wants a good ride here in the Tour de France. He's climbing now the Côte du Fos. It's 700 metres long, that climb, and very difficult it is too. Now Breukink is in the home straight. He's conquered the Côte du Fos, and his time, though, is not going to conquer that of Alex Zülle, his teammate. Breukink, a previous prologue winner in Luxembourg. He didn't finish the Tour de France that year. Now he's not going to win the prologue here either. 9th place for Erik Breukink. And this is the arrival of Thierry Marey. 3 prologue wins in the past since 1986 for him, but not so today. Marey in at the moment in 2nd place. Well, he's only just been pipped for that 2nd place, but here's the rider now, stamping out the rhythm, dancing up the climb of the Côte du Fos. The riders here have been using gears varying 44 by 18, 42 by 19, and Alex Zülle is the man who's done best on the climb so far, but Indurain powers over the top. Here's Hampson coming home at the other end. Hampson, though, is a little bit off the leaderboard, although for him, it's not such a bad time. That'll keep him in the top 35 riders, 33rd at the moment for Andy Hampsten, so a good tour start for him. This is Bugno coming round into the home straight. The time to beat is Zülle of 8.20, and Bugno is going to run Alex Zülle very, very close indeed, so he's made a good start here, the world champion. Gianni Bugno can face the course now with confidence. He's slightly outside Zülle's time. 2nd place, though, at the moment for Gianni Bugno. And now, out on the course, Miguel Indurain, the man who has conquered time trialing so much. He comes towards the finish while Claudio Chiappucci makes his final turn into the corner. And Claudio Chiappucci now sprinting up the home straight. The man who one time said he couldn't time trial, he now runs the big boys very, very close indeed. The same again, but he's conceding a few seconds here. Zülle still has the best time, 8.20, and Chiappucci is in 7th spot. But there is still the one big ride to the finish, and here he comes, Miguel Indurain. Look at the clock. Well, Miguel Indurain leaves nothing to the imagination in these time trials, does he? He won in San Sebastian 1 year ago where he beat Zülle. He's going to do the same again, emphatically so. 8.12.6 for Miguel Indurain on the line. So Miguel Indurain begins the Tour de France again in the Maillot Jaune as the leader. Zülle is 2nd, Bugno is 3rd, Thierry Marey is 4th, and Rominger is 5th. So the first stage in the Vendée, 135 miles. Now here's Paul Sherwin, 7 times a rider in the Tour de France, to explain how a team is constructed.
Every team is made up of some form of hierarchy. Take the word perfect team. Raul Alcala is the leader and he will be protected at all times by his colleagues. That protection can be anything from fetching water, pacing him back after mechanical problems, or even giving up their bike for him. Sometimes the whole team will be called upon to protect their boss. They set the pace at the front, discouraging any surprise attacks, as the RMO team do here to keep their man in the leader's yellow jersey. Once the road tilts upwards, it's the turn of the mountain men. Here Miguel Indurain has the protection of 3 climbers. They're the only men who have the strength to accompany him on the big climbs. They set the pace, allowing him to follow in their slipstream. When a team loses its direction due to the retirement of the top man, then policy has to change. Common tactic is to attack, sending one rider on a lone breakaway in the hope of winning an individual stage. The success rate of lone breakaways is low, but chances improve if a group of riders can break clear together and work for the common cause. Although from different teams, they will share the pacemaking, but they will all keep something in reserve for the final kilometres in the hope of stealing the show.
Thanks, Paul. And the second day here in the Vendée, the sun is shining once again from Luçon as the field roll away, led by Jelle Nijdam. Predictably, though, no action affecting the race all day, and the race has come down to this big bunch sprint. And now will we see the wheels of Cipollini? There's a crash, and I think Jamaleddin Abdujaparov in the pink jersey has gone down in that crash. He got bounced by a rider, I think, and it's let the field go at the front. And on the left of the picture now, we've got Mario Cipollini coming through, Wilfried Nellison of the Novamai team, and Johan Capio is trying to get through on the inside as well. This is a really tight sprint for the line, but look at Cipollini. He's a length clear on the line, and this is the result left something like 600 metres down the road. And indeed, number 181 there, the bicycle, that is Jamaleddin Abdujaparov. But this is the rider taking the stage victory. Mario Cipollini of Italy gets the stage, but no change at all overall. Indurain keeps that 12 seconds lead over Alex Zülle. And so the riders now set to leave Les Sables d'Olonne after an excellent beginning as they head straight up the western coastline towards Vannes, and Gianni Bugno here remarking on the green jersey now as points leader of Mario Cipollini after that stage win yesterday. Coming down though towards the end of this stage, and that is Jesper Skibby down there who's launched an attack, and it looks to me as though it could well be the American rider Lance Armstrong who's gone sailing by him, and it is indeed. This is Lance Armstrong, the 21-year-old in his first tour, and he really has come here to do well. He's not been overawed at all by the quality of the riders in this year's Tour de France. Armstrong on the attack. But you know, if anything, he's gone too soon. There's about 2 kilometres to go to the finish in Vannes. And Armstrong now is beginning to bite into those legs because there's a small group coming up. I think Bugno's got into this chase group. But there's a group now of, I think, about 8 riders coming clear of the field. Gianni Bugno is coming up as well. Armstrong is easing. He may have the strength to go again. But Bugno is going on the left of our picture, and in fact Bugno wants a little bit more help here in this leading group now. As they're trying to reorganise themselves, Armstrong has dropped to the back of these riders. There they are, 3, 6, 8 of them out in front. And Gianni Bugno is the rider setting the pace. Well, Bugno has proved he wants to convince everybody that he does have good form this year, despite a very poor season so far. One could say, I suppose, that's become rather typical of the performances early on, though, of Bugno. Last year he won the World Championship to salvage a bad year, and now he looks as though he might well be going to have a good Tour de France inside the last kilometre. And again, this race has become a battle almost of the sprinters, because there he is in the green jersey. Mario Cipollini is in this leading group, and so too is Jamaleddin Abdujaparov and Wilfried Nellison. They haven't made a mistake. They've read this perfectly well, and Abdujaparov in the centre is taking on Nellison. Cipollini's coming on the far left of our picture, but Nellison's outwitted them. The small uphill has done it. 25 miles an hour the stage today, 5 3/4 hours in the saddle. But that was a well-judged sprint there by Wilfried Nellison of the Novamai team, and here it is. Look at the speed, though, of Cipollini, but he misread the jump completely, and I think he's only got 3rd place. And there's confirmation of that. He's beaten by Abdujaparov as well. Ludwig is 4th. And thanks to the fine sprinting out on the course today, Wilfried Nellison, with the small bonuses, is now the leader of the Tour de France for the first time, 17 seconds ahead of Indurain. 118 miles, or 189.5 kilometres, the stage today as the riders now head across to Dinard on the Brittany coast. And this, the hotbed of cycle racing in France. The crowds as big, if not bigger than ever, these last few days of the Tour de France. And the finish now, again, a battle of the fastest riders in the world. as they head up towards the finish now. Ludwig is there in second place. He tries now to come off the wheel and snatch it, but the yellow jersey of Nelson is there too. He needs a top finish to keep that yellow jersey. He needs the small time bonuses on the line to hold in a sprint very late indeed here. 350 metres to go. Jamaldin Abdou-Japarov is waiting to move as well in that pink jersey. The green jersey is there of Mario Cipollini, third in line. Ludwig has got the lead. I bet he doesn't want that. It's too soon because the other three are on him, and Jamaldin Abdou-Japarov opens on the right. Now comes Cipollini in the middle. Wilfred Nellison, the three fastest men in the world, go to the line, and Abdou-Japarov gets it. So in 3 days, the three top men have had a stage apiece, and we'll have a look at that again now, because this was the happy return of Jamaldin Abdou-Japarov, the rider who a couple of years ago crashed so spectacularly on the Champs-Élysées and was carried away from the Tour de France as the winner of the race on points, and he still bears the scars of that opening day crash as well. Now we can see him coming through nearest the camera as Ludwig begins to fall back on the far side of our picture. Then the green jersey of Cipollini starts to challenge, but he gets a little bit rough in there as the weaving and the bobbing and the rolling there of the yellow jersey of Nellison. Cipollini chickens out a little bit, and Abdou-Japarov spoils his approach anyway as he gets a full-length clear with a superb piece of sprinting. And Abdou-Japarov gets his stage win. The first three riders today have now all won a stage in the opening 3 days of this year's Tour de France. And there we are, if anything, the top 6 riders, the fastest 6 men in the world. And so to the 4th stage, the important team time trial, and Tony Rominger is the biggest loser so far. 2 class teammates are out already with injury facing this team time trial.
Yes, it's really important, and these 2 guys we had, they was only for the time ride we had them here, and they are the 2 most important for us, and now we did lose them. I think we will lose some time.
Well, as we go to the time trial, this has been a great day out for the Motorola team as they come up this nasty little climb here into Avranches. It really is a brute at the end of 81 kilometres, but Motorola have been challenging amongst the best all of the way here. They were 5th fastest of all the teams through 30 kilometres, and now they're coming up towards the finish. And sure, Lance Armstrong it is on the left, who looks over his shoulder there to see where they all are, but they're right there, Lance, and they're the best time so far, 1 hour 34 minutes 36 seconds. And that is a tremendous ride by Motorola. They came down here on their way to the Tour de France. They spent a couple of days near Dinard looking at the route. Now the class team, have they suffered? And yes, they have suffered very, very much so indeed by the loss of 2 riders out before they reached this stage of the Tour de France with injury. And they were the 2 riders that Rominger wanted in this team for the team time trial. You can't get much worse luck than that. And look at this now, the class team finishing only 5 men together, and with the top team still to come, only in 5th place and conceding already more than 2 minutes. And the one team that has been setting the course alight at the checkpoint, the GB team, are in with the best time. 1 hour 34 minutes and 10 seconds. They're thinking of Cipollini in yellow tonight, and it could well be the case. Let's go down the course. This is the Novamai team with Wilfred Nellison in the yellow jersey. He knows his main challenge with his short-lived ambition of leading this tour for the opening week has got to be beating Cipollini. He's very, very strong, Nellison. He's led the team home, but it's not going to be good enough. The 3rd place so far, so they're behind Motorola. Motorola hold on to that 2nd slot. They're thinking long-term with Hampson and perhaps Mejia for the Classement General. This is Gianni Bugno's Gatorade team. Very briefly as we go to the finish for the arrival of Benesto. And Benesto only 5th. Gerard Rouet, the strong Frenchman on the squad, bringing them up the hill. And trouble out on the course for the Once team, the leaders at 30 kilometres. This is a front wheel puncture for their strongman, Diaz Zabala. He has been driving this team along on the open road and quite disgusted with the problem he's got now. I must say it's unusual to get a front wheel blowout. Now, will the team slow down and wait for him? I don't think they can possibly do that now. Up at the finishing line, Gatorade are coming in, and their time too is not a great one. Motorola are going to be feeling very pleased with their performance as the teams come and go. As the Gatorade team come home, they're only going to finish now in the top 8 if they're lucky. That's a quick glimpse of Johan Bruneel coming back, so that's a 2nd rider in the Once squad they've had a problem with. Now this is a shame. Once were the best time at 30 kilometres. They'd slipped behind GB at 57 kilometres, and they're not going to beat them now. They're going to be close though, desperately close. Motorola is their challenge, but they beat Motorola, and they lose at the moment by just 5 seconds. So that's it. The GB boys are the winners of the race ahead of Once Motorola, will be delighted with third. And that victory by GB boys has given the yellow jersey to Mario Cipollini by 6 seconds on the road to Évreux today. And there he is, saluting the crowd. We're now approaching the first sprint of the day at Repouvé, 17 kilometres covered. These are small time bonus sprints, and Cipollini increasing his lead overall, but only just, because that was Nelson nipping through in second place. The bunch reforming. Well, now we're on the uphill climb to the finish in Évreux. I once remember Pello Ruiz Cabestany taking the stage here, but now it could well be the Dane Jesper Skibby. The sprinters have been caught at the base of this climb. They've all gone back into the field, and Skibby's not waiting to find out whether they can sprint uphill or not. He's gone. It's a long, long way up this climb, and I hope he realises it, because he needs a very special sprint indeed. Jesper Skibby, who came into the Tour de France to replace the TVM leader, Gert-Jan Teunissen. Skibby himself was down and almost out forever in competition after a bad crash in the Tirreno Adriatico this year. But now he's got the gap. The sprinters are beginning to form at the front. It looked like Ferrigato there for the Gatorade boy who's coming through, but Nelson is there as well. As Skibby gets the stage, Nelson is in second place. But this will be remembered forever by Jesper Skibby. The return, quite literally, from his deathbed in Italy. Skibby is now the winner of the stage of the Tour de France. Nelson is second. And that second place by Wilfred Nelson has given him the overall lead again by just 2 seconds ahead of Cipollini, as the riders now head away from Évreux on the road to Amiens. And there's a very, very strong wind blowing today, and it's right behind the riders. A breakaway has already gone. It went after 5 kilometres on the descent of the Côte de Mesny. And the man that spearheaded is Motorola's Steve Bauer. It's good to see Steve back in the thick of the action again. Jacques Durand is also here, so too is Flavio Vanzella. They're the carrots today, and the average speed is already heading up towards a record for the Tour de France. As the field now reorganise themselves, Laurent Fignon in the green jersey there, riding his last Tour de France. And Miguel Indurain, number 1, with the Banesto riders not too far away from him. And that pacemaking has swept up those 3 leaders. Bauer and Co are back in the bunch after a break of 62 miles. These are 3 more riders trying to slip away here. But the one rider who's ahead of them is the remnants of a last-minute breakaway. It's Johan Bruneel. And Johan Bruneel for the Once team, a rider who has promised so much in previous Tours de France, but in fact has been dogged by bad luck. Last year, in fact, he had a fractured femur and then came on to win the time trial towards the end of the season. This is Johan Museeuw trying to slip away here. Still commanding a very good position overall in 9th place, and could well slip away for the jersey. But they're not going to catch Bruneel, I don't think. They're reorganising themselves in the chase, but the finishing line is approaching in Amiens. And this has been a tremendous average speed today, and I think we are witnessing the fastest stage ever in the Tour de France. And it could well be going to the credit of Johan Bruneel now. He looks over his shoulder. He's done the time trial of his life over these last couple of kilometres. He was in a small breakaway. He's the only survivor. The field has swept them all up, and the battle is on again for the yellow jersey. Remember, only 2 seconds separating Nelson and Cipollini. Bruneel has no chance of yellow, but he's every chance now of the stage victory. It's all his. Johan Bruneel of Belgium gets the stage victory. And that is the first Belgian stage win for a long, long time indeed. This is the sprint now for second place, and this time Cipollini back in the green jersey, being challenged by Abdou Japarov. Capio looks over his shoulder, sees nobody. He gets third. Cipollini gets second in the sprint, so Capiot is 4th on the day. And the new leader now will be Mario Cipollini yet again, ahead of Wilfred Nelson. And now the near 200-kilometre stage, taking the riders from Péronne, heading south to Chalon-sur-Marne. 174 riders still in the Tour de France. And this breakaway containing Johan Museeuw and Alvaro Mejia, Bjorn Ries here. This has been the most important escape, and there's a crash at the back. Ken Gyalt has gone down in collision with the motorbike. That's left the sprint now to Museeuw and Chiandri. Chiandri coming on the right, but look at the sprint finish by Bjorn Ries here. Well, Ries, I think, is going to get the stage. In fact, Museeuw will get the yellow jersey, but Bjorn Ries gets the stage, and that's a great win for him ahead of Chiandri, Museeuw, Mejia and Leonardo Sierra in 5th. Well, the big loser surely is Max Chiandri. Here's Paul Showing with him.
Max, you must be a bit upset about that, because everyone expected you to be the fastest man, and you got surprised by Rice at the very end. Yeah,
Yeah, the worst thing could have happened to me, you know, is get second, beaten by Reed, you know. I mean, this guy never just pulled as less as possible, you know, and then he beat me. But
is it because he's in the Arios team that it makes it feel a bit worse?
No. Can you get me some water? No, it's just, I mean, when you taste victory, you know, I mean, I already, when I passed Mousset, I said, that's it, I got it. And then this guy just comes passing by fast, you know, so it's really very disappointing.
Personally, yes, but for Motorola, Mejia now in second place. Kengi Alta there got up and walked over the line. He's now 5th overall as the riders face up to 184.5 kilometres from Chalon-sur-Marne to Verdun. 11 o'clock start time this morning. And the riders now settling in for a hot day in the sun and reflecting the sunshine. Johan Museeuw, the new leader of the Tour. And there is Mario Cipollini, still thinking of perhaps a return to yellow, but I think his chances have gone now, having missed that breakaway yesterday, the first decisive move of the race. As we now join the leader, Pascal Lans here. Just half a minute was the time gap on the climb of the Côte de Dourmont. And now the counter-attacks are coming, and this is Claudio Chiappucci who's launching the first one. They can see the leader on the climb. And it's the new pro for Castorama there, Laurent Brochard, who's now coming up behind him. Behind him is Lance Armstrong. And I think it might be David Cassani who's also tacking on at the back there. Well, they picked up Pascal Lans. And in fact, it's Chiappucci who's caused all of the reactions. That's a Lotto rider, in fact, who's trying to get in with the action at the back. But Chiappucci has gone straight through. Brochard. Then Pascal Lans is dropping away. Also here is Lance Armstrong. Now 1 kilometre to go to the top of the Dourmont. Well, Armstrong really surely isn't fancying himself for a place in the King of the Mountains. He might well be looking for a little group here, because once you're over the top of this climb, it's only 7 miles to the finish down in Verdun. Brochard making his attack. There's exactly where we are now, kilometre 172, the race distance 184. And Brochard keeping the rhythm going, followed by David Cassani is the rider who's now notched on behind Lance Armstrong in 3rd place. Cassani very much a challenger for the King of the Mountains at the moment. And I think Brochard has overdone it here because he's lost his rhythm. As we now look down on the top of the Col de Dourmont, and that breakaway has begun to establish itself, and if anything, it's swollen a little bit. This is Massimo Garotto at the front here. And that is Valerio Tebaldi who's trying to go. He's won 2 stages in previous Tours de France. He's an opportunist and he's taking his chance. No reaction. Chiappucci doesn't react. This is now Raul Alcala who's gone up alongside Massimo Garotto. Ronan Ponsek is there. So too is Armstrong. Stephen Roche has come up riding his last Tour de France. Now this is a very, very different breakaway group indeed, and Roche is the man at the front, bringing up towards the line now. Roche is the first shot at goal. And the rider in this group, Lance Armstrong, at the back as he moves wide. Lance Armstrong hooked a little bit there by Ronan Ponsek. But in fact, Ponsek making a run for the line, and he really is not a sprinter at all. Armstrong has been washed away a little bit. Alcala coming on the right of the picture, but Armstrong is coming back. This could be a fairy tale entry to his first Tour de France. Lance Armstrong is through. And the young American, the youngest man in the race, in fact, Lance Armstrong, has won his stage in the Tour de France at Verdun. And look how easily he did it. Now a sprinter like Ponsek lets him through on his right, and he's got plenty of room. While Raul Alcala, they battled out the Tour du Pont together. Now they battle out this stage of the Tour de France. And I wonder, Lance Armstrong, now as he wins his stage, just how does it feel?
It feels good today, especially after yesterday. I think that we placed ourselves well yesterday with 3 out of the 7, and I would have bet a lot of money that we weren't going to lose that race yesterday, and we did. So it was definitely on my mind today. I was looking at the profile the last couple of days, and I said this could be my day.
Everybody thought this stage would be Chiandri's, but after yesterday, was the team a little bit down?
I think not all was lost yesterday. I mean, we lost the stage, but we moved ourselves well up on Team GC, and we still got second, but that doesn't mean much.
$1 million he won in June, and now he's won a stage in the Tour de France for Lance Armstrong, but overall, Johan Museeuw keeps his lead ahead of Alvaro Mejia of Colombia. And so the first big test around the Lac de Madine, the time trial of 59 kilometres, and Rominger among the early starters because he's down in 87th place today. Having been penalised that minute in the team time trial, we're now looking at Miguel Indurain, who continues to plough through the field. He's got to move up now also because he's wallowed in the double figures. As we go to the finishing line now, Gianni Bugno, having seen Rominger finish very early on in terrible weather, Bugno now gets the better of him here by just 31 seconds. So the world champion remains a challenger, but what will Miguel Indurain do? He's been the best time at every check, and he's going to do what he did in Luxembourg, but you know he's not going to be as emphatic as he was in Luxembourg. He wins the time trial by 2 minutes and 11 seconds ahead of Gianni Bugno, as we now see Eric Breukink come home as well, and Breukink too is remaining on the peripheral of this race this year. 2 minutes and 22 seconds he concedes, but he finishes this stage in third place behind Bugno and Miguel Indurain, who is back in the leader's yellow jersey. Today the Tour de France 1993 goes into the mountains, and this is the top of the Col de Galibier, the high spot of stage 10. The road from Villard-de-Lans to Serre-Chevalier is a tough one in this first day in the Alps. After crossing the Col de Glandon at 1,951 metres, the riders go on to the Col de Telegraphe. But this really is only a stepping stone to the top of the giant Col de Galibier at 2,645 metres. And things now reshaping here on the climb of the Col de Telegraphe at 1,566 metres. Stefano Colliget, who is in the lead alone over the top of the Col de Glandon, he's been swept away now, and the yellow jersey group 4 minutes down on the Glandon, led here by Rominger and Indurain, now very much coming back into the thick of the action here. A long steady climb as we look at Thierry Claverola setting the pace at the front, and the big group now chasing him all the way up to the top of the Col de Telegraphe. Claverola goes over first, former King of the Mountains in the Tour de France, chased over by Pedro Delgado, Thierry Bourguignon. They're the riders who've gone over just behind. But the men that really matter still very much all together here. Raul Alcala just ahead of Rominger and Indurain over the top of the climb. Well, that's the Telegraph out of the way for some of them, but in fact Bugno here is still losing ground on the leaders and still looks now to be going out of the hunt for a yellow jersey in this year's Tour de France. A little check back to see just who has made this very select group, and Indurain has not put a foot wrong so far. But Laurent Fignon fights to survive now as he comes over the top of the Telegraph in quite a big group here. The days are gone when he was riding alone on the mountains, winner of the Tour de France in 1983 and 1984, but now riding his final tour in what has been a great career. So the riders will have a little time to recover on the short descent before they start the Col de Galibier. And this is now Pedro Delgado, once the leader of the Benesto team, or Reynolds as it was in those days, and the man under his wing that was Miguel Indurain. Now he's the leader, and Indurain very much now being protected by the man they call Perico. Delgado setting the pace. He's been riding very, very well today. He went away in the early attack on the Col de Glandon in defence of Miguel Indurain, gained 3 minutes in fact. Now Indurain has come up in a strong group. Andy Hampson just gone through, so too Alvaro Mejia. Mejia has slipped back to second place after that time trial yesterday. He was second overall, but now he's riding on the terrain he loves best in his fourth Tour de France, and that is the mountains. Now the riders begin to face up to the climb of the Col de Galibier. First time they came up this mountain, and from the same side indeed, the north face, was the 10th of July 1911. And neither Indurain nor Delgado will remember much about that. But there they are, right at the front. Delgado, the man who's going to protect Indurain for as long as possible as the climb begins. It's been a long, long hot day. This is Zenon Jaskula here, the Polish rider. Well, Poles have never had a great deal of success in the Tour de France. They've had the yellow jersey only once when the race started in Berlin. And now Jaskula looking over his shoulder as he tries to apply the pressure. So it looks as though, again, Indurain is paying very close attention, although I wouldn't have thought he would mark Jaskula too closely. He's not a rider with a great pedigree. Former team time trial rider in his great days on the Polish national squad. A world and an Olympic silver medal in that discipline. But it looks as though Jaskula may well have started the move here, because he's opened the gap. He's got the elite of the Tour coming up to him too. Andy Hampson in the middle of those three, Rominger leading, Indurain in yellow, and Zenon Jaskula, surprisingly, the rider setting the pace. So Andy Hampson is reading things well and looking quite relaxed at the moment. rode to his second, fourth place in the Tour de France last year. This is the group with Bugno, and they're over 4 minutes behind on the slopes here. And now as we climb further up the slopes of the Col de Galibier towards the snow line, the board here being indicated to Andy Hampsten, and Mecchia is the rider who's tagged on the back. So we now have two of the Motorola team up here, two cards to play as they ride alongside Miguel Indurain. Rominger is the back, Jaskula is setting the pace. Surprise without doubt is Zenon Jaskula. But Tony Rominger, who lost so much time in the team time trial because he lost two teammates before they even got to that stage, and then he was penalised a minute for pushing amongst the team. That pushed him right down the overall. He's had to fight really hard to stay in contention. There's Henny Kuiper, twice second in the Tour de France, the director of Motorola, and he's now telling Alvaro Mecchia what he expects of him on this climb. Henny is a great enthusiast. He'll be riding every pedal rev with these riders from his team. Hampsten concentrating hard. Looking a bit further down the field now, the Amaya riders here, as they start to make the way up the climb. Fignon is on the right, and Fignon too is still trying to keep himself in the frame. John Unzaga, Claudio Chiappucci, these riders, you know, are losing ground. Chiappucci suffering terribly here. He said after the time trial finish he would concentrate now on winning the King of the Mountains. Well, he's going to have to concentrate very hard because he's lost the wheels of the men that matter today on his first full day in the mountains. And Rominger is the rider setting the pace. Indurain, despite his size, pedals so comfortably, reminds me very much of Eddy Merckx. And this is the champion of Holland, Erik Breukink, trying to fight a way back into the picture here. He's still off the back of that lead group. If it's any consolation, though, he carries the right number, number 51, because that's won more Tours de France than any other number. And it's the one they all want. Rominger, obviously hurting himself, and looking at the face of Indurain, he's not really hurting Miguel at the moment. Well, the rider that he's going past here looks like it's Juan Carlos Martin from Amaya, who's falling back. And the rider coming up here, Oliveira Rincon, replacing his teammate in the chase. And just look at the carnage further down the Galibier now. It isn't such a difficult climb when you cut the wide roads of the other side of this mountain, but this is a tough approach. Rider number 14 here, Vladimir Kulnikov, the world champion, Gianni Bugno. And number 59, well, Alex Zülle is not enjoying his tour at all. He's never really been in the fight since his crash on the Côte de Douaumont. Well, the riders are suffering, but you don't see finer pictures than these in the Tour de France. Erik Breukink being coaxed all the way up towards the top. He's still very much in with a chance here, hanging on, hopefully, to the second place overall gained after that time trial yesterday. He started the stage a minute and 35 seconds behind Indurain, but he's losing more than that right now. Rominger bringing them up towards the snow line. Indurain never goes to the front, never sets the pace. It's up to them to get rid of him. He knows it too, and only the two Motorola, oh, just at the back there too is Zenon Jaskula. He's still there. Jaskula, who started this move that brought the elite to the front. And in fact, Breukink is limiting his losses on the climb of the Galibier. Almost up to the cloud line. Jaskula now pushed to the back of this group. But I have to say, I'm quite surprised that the big Zenon is actually hanging on to the back of this rather select group of pure climbers. Indurain content to follow the little man from Switzerland who lives in Monaco. He's won the last two Tours of Spain. He's ridden two Tours of France. He's never before won a stage nor finished in a high position at the end. And now Tony Rominger this year has come with a great reputation, up to number 2 in the world ranking of the riders, and he won't be too pleased with the spectator now who's trying to run along in front of him. A little glance over his shoulder there just to see if the wheel of Indurain was right under his shoulder, and it was. Now you see the tunnel straight ahead there at Breukink very briefly. That was the old road to the top of the Col de Galibier, but now you turn right and the road steepens and it goes on a little bit further, almost 800 meters more to climb these days on the Col de Galibier. Not the time you should tell the riders that, I suspect, but Indurain has now gone to the front. Indurain now wants to stamp his authority and prove to Rominger that he's still very much in yellow at the top of the big climb today. This is the high point of the Tour so far. Tomorrow we go even higher. And Rominger again switches back to the front. There's 3 riders now. The man who's been detached is Andy Hampsten, but Mejia, signed this year on loan almost from Postobon to the Motorola team, he is now proving his worth. Over the top of the climb, Rominger takes it from Indurain and Mejia. A bit further down the slopes now, Breukink coming up, but already with Rincon indeed, over 2 minutes has now passed by. Chance of a quick drink for the new champion of Holland before he faces the long descent. As we get towards the old entrance again to that tunnel, the world champion though, Gianni Bugno, is more than 3.5 minutes back and not enjoying his Tour de France. Richard Veron coming up now, 2 minutes 38 seconds back with Moléon, the rider just behind him. The surprise of last year when he briefly held at the yellow jersey before he passed it to his teammate Pascal Lino. And even further down is Alex Zülle. He could well be waving goodbye to any possibility in this year's Tour, and he's doing it the first day in the Alps. Well, the riders, or at least some of them, said they wanted more mountains. Well, they've got the more mountains this year. 2 very tough days here, and then we go down to the tough days in the Pyrenees. And the question must be asked, will Fignon make the tough days in the Pyrenees now? Comes up with riders he would never have given the time of day 10 years ago. As he comes up to the top of the Col de Galibier for the last time in his career, Fignon now faces the descent. The same has to be said too of Stephen Roche back in 1987, the winner of the Big 3, the Tours de France, Italy and the world title. Only Eddy Merckx has done that besides Roche, and he too now playing his swan song to the Col de Galibier, and I think it hurt. Well, this first day, all the shadow boxing is over. Another man losing enormous chunks of time. There, Claudio Chiappucci. Breukink is fighting to try and limit his losses here and retain his second place overall. But I think at the moment, that second place is swinging very much back in the favour of Mejia, where he was before the time trial yesterday. Then he did a poor time trial and slipped away to 8th. There he is. Hampsten has gone, but he's still chasing. Lost on the climb towards the end of the Galibier, running down now towards Serre Chevalier. And perhaps it's the time to remember that we finished here twice before. Back in 1974, Lopez Carril was the stage winner. He went on to finish 3rd in the Tour de France. In 1975, Bernard Thévenet broke the grip of the mighty Eddy Merckx. There's trouble here. There's trouble here for Eric Breukink, and I think the problem's with his gears. Well, there we are. We can see it in slow motion. The camera's caught it, and in fact his gears appear to have jammed, or his freewheel sprockets have locked up. Either way, it's not the time to have a bike change. So when your luck is out, it's really out for the champion of Holland, losing ground in the mountains and now having to find his rhythm as we get back to the 1 kilometre to go. And Miguel Indurain is going to feel very, very happy. Surely he wouldn't have known just how well Rominger would go in the first day in the Alps. And Rominger too wanted to know if Indurain could match him. Well, the answer is now plain for everybody to see. Miguel Indurain was controlling this race in the big mountains today. Rominger was not given the opportunity to attack. And these 3 riders now coming down to the finish together. Hampsten still on the road a little way back, as Indurain now brings them through the chicanes here as we line up for the finish. And just to finish my little story about Bernard Thévenet, Thévenet went on to win the race when he won the stage here, and I wonder if that is in the mind now of Indurain. Rominger looks across at Indurain, gets the corner first. It's the man with the most skills. He holds a very tight line very quickly indeed, using all of the road. It might be the only way to survive a sprint here, because he's holding the pressure on. Mejia is just about hanging on to the wheel of Rominger. Rominger checks it out, and he's going to get his first stage win in the Tour de France ever. So Tony Rominger gets his stage win. He's the man of the day, and now he's with Paul Sherwin.
Are you surprised about the explosion of so many riders like Bugno and Chiappucci today? Because really everyone was waiting for tomorrow.
Yes, it's a big surprise, but it's when we are looking the last Tour de France, always the first day in the big mountains is always the interesting day. And it was the last year, was 2 years ago, and also this year you are seeing always this. They are all good, and then they try to do something, and somebody is going back.
What about one quick word to Miguel Indurain today?
He's the number one. We saw it also today.
Indeed we did, Tony, but you were the man that got the stage win ahead of Alvaro Mejia, Indurain all of the same time. Hampsten was 4th. He held on, beating Zenon Jaskoula in the sprint. And further down the list too, it was Erik Breukink who hung on for 6th place. Zula only 18th. And look at the time gaps now. Roach and Kierpucci losing over 8 minutes. Overall, Indurain more than 3 minutes though ahead of Mechia. Jaskula. Breukink holds on to a high place in 4th. Rominger now in 5th slot, 5 minutes 44 seconds back. Andy Hampsten in 6th place. Gianni Bugno, the world champion, but over 10 minutes back is 9th. And then Roach over 12 minutes down and Kierpucci almost 14 minutes back. So the race goes on, the second day in the Alps now, a ride of 112.5 miles. It all happens, first of all, on the Col d'Izoard, 2,360 metres, onto the Col de Var, and then up the highest pass in France, and I think in Europe, the Col de la Bonnette, and that takes them over 2,800 metres. And if you think after all that they deserve a rest, they don't, because they climb up to the finish at 2,000 metres. And this is the sprint for the top of the Col d'Izoard. The main pack have more or less stayed together, but there's 1 or 2 big names off the back, including Laurent Fignon. Claudio Kierpucci taking a little bit of revenge there, maybe on for a better day than he had yesterday. Rominger second, David Cassani over there in 3rd place, and another Spaniard, Federico Echavé, in 4th place. And it looks as though Cassani here, wearing the King of the Mountains jersey, has taken the tentative as we head off now towards the second climb, the Col de Var. And now the field here with Indurain in this forward portion of the group. They're in pursuit. There was 3 minutes in the gap, in fact, behind Cassani at one stage. It's come down considerably, but it won't stop him getting the lead here. And maximum points in the King of the Mountains at the top of the Vars. Kierpucci comes up in 2nd place. Just over a minute has gone by. Rominger over in 3rd. And now they're facing up the long descent before they line up for the high climb of the Restafond. Col de la Bonnette, and as Paul Sherwin said when he drove over this climb last night, it was probably the worst climb he'd ever seen, and he was rather pleased that they never included this climb during his years in the Tour de France. In fact, this climb has only been climbed twice before, back in the 60s, 1963 and 1964, and it was the great Spanish champion Federico Baramontes, the Eagle of Toledo, who was the man who won at the top of the climb on both occasions. And it looks as though Kierpucci is in trouble now. That's Bjorn Ries who has dropped him there. So Claudio, again, he's not enjoying his Tour de France. He's losing ground there on the slope. And on the Restafond, the rider's now trying to get some semblance of order here, because this is a very, very long climb indeed. It takes them more than an hour as they try to be... They're under the policemanship here of the class team, and Indurain is the man that they're worried about. Again, on the inside, the smooth pedalling rider, Tony Rominger, and Indurain concentrating totally on him. He sees him as now the man to beat, although Mechia, the rider to the right of our picture there in the blue jersey, is in 2nd place overall, and Jaskula, I haven't quite caught a glimpse of him yet. If he's in this group, he's 3rd. But Rominger is the man that Indurain fears most in the mountains. Demonstrated amply yesterday how strong he is winning the stage. But there's no reason to hurry on this climb. As long as you keep the tempo at the right speed, the riders will fall back. And these are the 2 leaders at the bottom of the climb. They swept up Cassani before they got here. And Delgado is now being dropped by Robert Miller. Well, Miller is going alone, and I'm not sure that's a wise thing to do so early on, because there's a long way to go to the finish here. And Robert Miller is facing a long, hot ride by himself. It's a strange climb, the Col de la Bonnette. It really is like the shape of a hat, because the riders climb to the top and they go round the side of the bonnet, and then they descend away down to the left of our picture, back down to the bottom and the finish, before they have to climb, of course, up through Isola 2000. That's a climb the Tour de France has never before gone up, and it's very, very steep. Well, Delgado a couple of years ago would never have lost ground to Robert Miller. But is he saving his strength to stand by his team leader, Miguel Indurain? Because Miller is no threat to the overall. He knows Miller very, very well indeed. Miller wants a stage win, purely and simply. And there he is, the Scot who claims to be the first man with the long hair, tied up at the back. Many people attribute that to Laurent Fignon, and he gets very upset about that. And Miller now on his own. His lead is 45 seconds. Miller, when he rides well like this, is magnificent to watch. He's now riding his 11th Tour de France. Rode his first tour back in 1983, and that was when we first saw the Scots' great talent. Finished 14th that year. He's Delgado now going back to the select group containing Indurain. And among others, Jaskula is also there. So too is Rominger, Mechia, I think Hampsten is there as well. I'm not too sure though whether in fact Erik Breukink is there, and he could be the big name that's missing. So Robert Miller on his way at the front, but facing a long, tough ride to the finish if he's going to survive for his first ever stage win in the Alps. Normally a man for the Pyrenees. Perico back in the group now. Nice to have a look at Miller. Sorry about the little bit of break-up here. It's due to the microwave link-ups which bring these pictures from way out in the mountains back to the finishing line where the commentary is being made. And Miller being left now to do all of the work. I feel sure he would have liked a little bit of company on this long climb just to break up the pacemaking. John Unzaga is here now alongside his team leader, Tony Rominger. Well, Rominger may have lost his men he wanted for the team time trial, but he's still got the man he needs for the mountains. Unzaga, a great climber. Men who can so easily win races in their own right, but they have to succumb to the domesticity of helping their team leaders. And I know the riders were very, very worried about this climb. They knew how long it was. Nobody in the current crop of racing cyclists have ever raced over this climb before. It's like riding across the moon, isn't it? And now you can see it. That's the bonnet, and the white is the road that goes right round the bonnet before they come back virtually on themselves. At one stage, there is about a 40-yard stretch of road where they cross each other as they begin the descent away down to the bottom before the climb to Isola. Now Miller making progress towards the summit, heading up towards the top of the bonnet itself. Now you can just feel how steep this climb really is. Well, Miller at least is going to put his name down alongside that of Federico Ballamontes. Only the two of them in 3 times have won this climb. And that will put Miller among the greats at least as a climber. And Miller, still the only rider from the British Isles to have won the King of the Mountains title. He did that back in 1984 when he finished 4th in the Tour de France. And now he's climbing to the top of the Col de la Bonnette. Well, he made his move right at the base of this climb, at the 101 kilometers point today. That's about 63 miles, and leaving himself a long, long way to go. Slightly into the second half of the stage today. Well, there's no need yet, Robert, to look over your shoulder, because the next group is around about 1 minute behind. There's the average speed, just on 30 kilometers, about 18 miles an hour so far. But if you've seen the roads they've climbed today, that really is quite quick. And this is John Unzaga at the front of this select group with Tony Rominger. The yellow is Indurain, then behind is Mejia. Roberto Conti is here from Ariostoia, and Andy Hampsten and Pedro Delgado. They are the men who are next up the slopes of the Col de la Bonnette. And then just off the back of them is Zenon Jaskula. That man is still hanging in, and he's going to be in a very high position overall tonight if he continues riding like this. The next climb, the last climb of the day, will be the climb of Isola 2000. They welcome the Tour de France for the first time, and they've named all of the corners after the past greats of this great event. Well, second over was Rominger. Just about 1 minute and 10 seconds was the gap. Indurain, Mejia, Delgado. That's the order they've gone over the top. A very, very quick descent indeed, this. There aren't too many corners. You can see the slope going right down ahead of us. There's just a right-hand bend that brings the riders through, and we've now accomplished that as we begin to regroup at the base of the climb up to Isola 2000. Well, this is a very, very steep climb indeed. It's not as long as the Col de la Bonnette, but then nothing is. And Indurain has got himself back together. Miller is still away. Rominger waiting for somebody else to make the move. And I would think the atmosphere down there, if you're a rider now, is very, very tense, because they're all sensing that something must happen on this climb. Rominger himself, and that's the face of Miller now as he struggles on the climb, and that is the sad sight because they're bringing him back. Well, Miller has had a tremendous breakaway, but I don't think he will survive the attacks that are going to come for sure now. They will launch the attacks, and Chiappucci has come up to this group with a marvellous descent off the top of the La Bonnette, because he was something like 3 minutes down on the climb. He's bridged that gap, and he's done it all with a very, very good descent of La Bonnette. So, a poor start to the Alps might be a nice finish for Claudio Chiappucci. As he starts the climb here, and the rider right alongside him is Bjorn Ries. There's another surprise now. Bjorn Ries free of his team leader, Moreno Argentin, who's changed teams this year. And Ries now free to ride his own race, and he's having a great tour. Early leader in the King of the Mountains, but quite honestly, nobody would have expected Bjorn Ries to be in at the kill after a day like this. And there, poor old Robert Miller has been passed by Kier Pucci and Bjorn Ries. And Danish television, by the way, covering the Tour de France with 70 hours of live coverage. And the Danish riders are responding so well to that. A stage win also. We've seen that already at Evreux with Jesper Skibby. Zenon Jaskula also accelerating, seeing the train is leaving the station, and the man who's going to miss it is Andy Hampsten. Hampsten doesn't appear to have the acceleration there. Mechia is up there. So, little Claudio Chiappucci, I mean, what do you make of this? This is a rider who was suffering over the mountains for the last 2 days and suddenly found his legs. And sadly, the same can't be said for Andy. Mechia, now the undisputed team leader of Motorola and trying to hold on to his high position overall. Indurain still showing no signs of feeling the pressure. Rominger setting the pace but not cracking the master. Well, it's a pity you can't quite see the names on those boards there, because each one, beginning with the first winner of the Tour de France, takes you right up to the last bend, and you can guess whose name is on the last corner as the winner for the past 2 years. It's Miguel Indurain. And the way we're going, Indurain might be the first rider to see his own name here. Ries, Chiappucci, Indurain, Rominger, Mechia. The names now who are shaping the Tour de France, and Robert Miller just about holding them in sight. Well, I have to say, Robert, you're doing a great ride, because after the way you climbed the Col de la Bonnette, I really didn't think you'd still be holding on to these great names of the world of cycling at this stage of the second day in the Alps. Chiappucci, they're all letting him do the work now, so Rominger perhaps is planning a late attack. He needs to take time. He's up now to 4th place overall, but he's 5 minutes and 44 seconds behind Indurain. Jaskula has got across, not so for Hampsten. In fact, it looks as though Andy's lost quite a bit of ground over these last few corners. 4 kilometres to the top, 2.5 miles to climb, and Indurain content now to set the pace, and seemingly Rominger content to follow it. They've tamed the devil. He's now riding no-handed in 3rd place. No doubt about thinking of something else, but will you believe this? Miller's only just come on, and he's gone. Robert Miller has gone again, inside 4 kilometres to go. I don't know where he's found the effort from, but Miller has gone. And that is a superb piece of riding by the Scotsman. Robert Miller, who has done so much on the climb of La Bonnette, he was caught right as this climb began. He's gone again, and Indurain has not responded. He wants somebody else to do it. Indurain is watching the one man he fears. He's got him in 2nd place, Tony Rominger. Jaskula is sitting at the back, and one has to say Zenon Jaskula has followed the wheels these past 2 days, but he's followed them very, very well indeed. Bjorn Ries is still up here as well. Mechia, Chiappucci has found his second life, and now they're leaving it to Indurain to try and bring back Robert Miller. Round about 3 kilometres to go, and the road doesn't get any easier, believe me. And there is Miller, and you know, I do think, in fact, that the steady rhythm here of Indurain is clawing back Robert Miller. Well, what a shame. The Spanish flag flies on the left over the head of Indurain. But Robert Miller really has deserved the win today. He's ridden so well. And there's the Scottish flag being flown on the left of the road too for Robert. 2.5 kilometres to go. Indurain is just looking straight at the back of Miller, and he's pulling him in. Obviously, Miller had sensed that the time was right, but it looks now as though Indurain is the man who's going to spoil a great day out for Robert Miller. He's a man we always expect to ride well in the Pyrenees. He's won there before, but he's never won in the Alps, and it looks now as though he won't be winning this year either, because this is the last day in the Alps, and it's been a real sort out of the men from the rest. There's no doubt now that the winner and the top places from this year's Tour de France is going to come from this very elite group. As we pass underneath the 2 kilometres to go banner, Jaskula still hanging on there. I think he's got his braces caught to the saddle of Mechia. And Indurain now just sitting there, pedalling straight by Miller, doesn't even look at him. Miller looking to who the last man is. He's going to try and snatch the wheel and hold on. Rominger through on his wheel. Chiappucci, Mechia. Jaskula detached a little bit, but Riis is the big surprise. Bjorn Riis is going to have a high position overall tonight, as Jaskula moves up nicely too, and Kierpucci noting who it was that was coming up on his left shoulder. Riis is closing in, and just look at the lovely crowd here for the first time now on Isola 2000. They talk of this as the new Alpe d'Huez of the Tour de France, and maybe one day it will be. It's a tough climb, a kilometre to go, and I think it's Jaskula. Yes, it was. Jaskula's waited to see that red kite in the sky, and immediately Rominger says, "You're not spoiling the party now," has gone across to him. And well, you might have guessed it, that Indurain is the man who's marking Rominger everywhere, and they go straight by Jaskula, and Rominger has been forced to make the counter-offensive, and indeed Indurain has just gone straight up to him with all the ease of a champion. And that's all he wanted to do as well. Indurain has got his wheel. Now, can he reverse the result of yesterday? Because Rominger is in with a chance of doing 2 in a row. I think it was Joop Zoetemelk who last did that in the mountains when he won 2 straight stages. Rominger, who's ridden the Tour de France twice before, and you wouldn't have known he was ever in it, is now a great man and a great threat. Champion's the word, and we're looking at 2 of them, as they now face the short descent to the finishing line, and it really isn't much of a descent at all, as Rominger now is going to have to lead out. Indurain has got the advantage. Indurain trying to get the inside of the sharp bend and take it first. 100 metres to go. Indurain's got the inside. Indurain might well be taking the stage. He'd like to do it. He's set up. He's realised the speed was too much. Tony Rominger has got the stage victory. And then coming home here in 3rd place, it looks as though we've now got Claudio Kierpucci has come back into this Tour de France, although in all reality he's lost too much time. He gets 3rd place. Jaskula is also there in 4th, and there's the gallant hero of the day. Robert Miller is coming home slightly detached in that last 2 kilometres, but really he did deserve the win, and he rode a great stage. So Rominger ahead of Indurain and Kierpucci. They were the first 3 over the line. Miller will have come home there in 7th place, 5 hours 41 minutes in the saddle today. The surprise, Bjorn Riis in 6th place today, losing just 31 seconds. And you know, he was never considered to be a climber. Miller lost a minute in the end in 7th place, but look at the others. Roche Zulabunyo, more than 12 minutes back.
Normally you don't ride so well in the Alps, and today it really looked like a Pyrenean stage, and it looked as if it was going to smile for you.
No, normally I ride well about the 11th or 12th day, and this is the 11th day, so I thought I'd try today. You never know. Normally when you go away and when it's hard, the guys who are riding to win the race don't really chase you down, but they were fighting amongst themselves again, so it wasn't really the best time.
Well, that was a superb move you made right at the end there. It looked as if you might just surprise him, but it was Indurain himself who put the hammer down to come back to you.
Yeah, the opportunity was there, and I took it. I only needed 200 meters, and then I think they would have hesitated a little bit, but yeah, they ride behind, so you know there's no gifts in this race.
The next couple of days you probably hide. Will we see you up again in the Pyrenees?
I hope so.
We all hope so, Robert, but the overall Indurain at 3 minutes 23 seconds ahead of Mechia. Jaskula, the surprise, in 3rd place, Rominger 4th and Riis 5th. 2 days in the Alps, and there had been some decisions in this year's Tour de France. Out of the race had gone the former double winner, Laurent Fignon. He was riding his final tour. Finishing in the ambulance was Wilfred Nellison of the Novomai team, a one-time leader and a stage winner. The points leader, the green jersey of the Tour, Mario Cipollini, had gone too. The Tour de France always shapes a rider's character, and survival is often the key word as the riders here share a drink and their rivals. And thinking of the future perhaps, Lance Armstrong, a non-starter today on the race's longest stage. Miguel Indurain in just 3 racing days has made up time from 3 minutes 17 seconds behind to that gap 3 minutes 23 seconds in the lead. Now, one man who knows all about winning the Tour de France is Eddy Merckx. He's won it 5 times. He had this to say about Miguel Indurain.
He's the best now. I think time trial rider like him now, nobody can beat him in this Tour de France, I think so. There are not really great climbers in this moment, and also the climber they are 30 years old, so I don't see nobody to beat Miguel in this Tour.
Well, perhaps then, Eddie, we can only hope that after the fact he's a year older at 29, he might slow down. Not surprisingly, the bunch staying together in these early opening kilometres. But now this is the happy face of what has been a long, hot day in the saddle of over 7 hours so far. This is Fabio Roscioli. He promised his neighbours he would win a stage of the Tour de France, and it looks like he's going to do it now. By the time he gets to the line and wins this stage, if he does, and he's going to now, he will have been in the lead at some stage of this race today for almost 200 kilometres. And he's been alone for 147 kilometres. He's pulling back 20 minutes on the principal riders of this year's Tour de France, but he was 1 hour and 90 minutes down at the start. He won't worry about that. Fabio Roscioli has got his stage win in the Tour de France. And overall, though, there's no change at all. Indurain still leading Mechia by 3:23. Jaskula, Rominger and Rees exactly as it was this morning. But now the riders are in the hottest part of the south of France here on the Mediterranean, and today's stage, 185.5 kilometres, taking them from Marseille to Montpellier. The question is, who's going to win?
I think Johan Museeuw is going to win.
Museeuw or myself?
Abdu, I think. Abdu Saburov.
Lauritsen.
Abdu Japarov.
I think it's going to be a sprint, and I think Abdu Japarov is going to win.
Moccasin.
Santa Marita.
I think Naidam. He attacked the last kilometer.
Hans Maassen.
Oh, I think maybe Steve Bauer is going in an early attack.
That's only because Steve Bauer was sitting by Dag Otto Larsen at the time we asked him the question. Well, the riders are now frying in very hot weather, and the weather has proved a little bit too much for a man that does come from the heat of Australia. Neil Stevens, he's not been well, and now the sad sight of him giving up the Tour de France for the ONCE team. But the race now in the closing stages, and the sprinters from the Telecom. This is Uwe Raab here trying to lead out his former East German amateur teammate Olaf Ludwig. Abdu Japarov is third in line here, so the sprinters in a perfect place for the poise for the attack as they start for the line now, and it looks as though Ludwig is going to come up on the barriers. Abdu Japarov can't get off his wheel. Olaf Ludwig gets the stage. Nobody mentioned him. Ludwig takes the victory then ahead of Jamaluddin Abdu Japarov. And let's have a look at that. He was ahead of Museeuw in third place, Verdanza fourth, and Moncassin was in fifth place. The green jersey competition after 13 stages, Jamaluddin Abdu Japarov leads this now quite clearly ahead of Ludwig, Jalabert and Gendry. The hot weather continues from Montpellier to Perpignan, 224 kilometres or 140 miles. And the weather really has turned very, very hot indeed. Now it's like an oven down here as we go across an area around the Camargue. Stephen Roche tempting the riders to come and join him. But nobody, it seems, wants to. This is Johan Bruneel. We saw him win the fastest ever stage of any Tour de France up in the north of France, but he never felt the weather like this. And this little breakaway now beginning to establish itself. 6 riders. The rider in the Carrera jersey is Mario Chiesa, Johan Bruneel the leader, Gianni Farrazan, Pascal Lino, Giancarlo Perini. And the rest of the race, frankly, just about staying in touch, and it's the Banesto riders who are having to set the pace. Well, France are still waiting for the first stage win, and there are only 2 left in this breakaway now. Giancarlo Perini, who's riding his 8th Tour de France and never won a stage, and the other rider is Pascal Lino, who is riding his 4th Tour de France, and he too has never won a stage, but he finished 5th last year and led the race as well. And he's quite clearly feeling confident now, more concerned with the group behind, because there's the gap, it's only 10 seconds. And the rest of the race is closing in. They're now playing off here against one another, and there's the rest of the breakaway of Bruneel. But they're all hesitating. Lino does not want to lead out Perini because he could lose the sprint. He's prepared to take the gamble. There's the remnants of the breakaway, Chiesa there as well. And Perini is watching and waiting and now feels he's got to go, and that's exactly, no indeed, it's Lino has gone. Lino saw Perini make the move, and in fact Pascal Lino has gone. He wants this one desperately because the French have been criticised so much this year in the Tour. And now, and Perini's coming back, he hasn't got it yet. There's a great challenge from Giancarlo Perini, and it's very, very close on the line. There's no hand signal there from Pascal Lino. But the supporters here do seem to think he's got it. We'll have a look at the photo finish, and indeed he has, but only by half a wheel there. And Pascal Lino has given the French the first stage victory of this year's Tour de France in Montpellier, but only just. Well, I'm not surprised he's happy. I think it's a smile of relief as much as anything else. And the main pack 16 minutes behind, no change overall. Stephen Roche is riding his last tour, and in saying au revoir, he loses a piece of himself.
Well, I think part of him will definitely go, yes, because it's nature, it's natural. I think it's like today I'm idolised for my performance on and off the bike, whereas tomorrow when it's all gone, there'll be somebody else signing autographs on the start line.
Roche's greatest year came in 1987. He'd won the Tour of Italy and he'd won the Tour de France, but it was a race that found he had to dig very deep into his reserves. He rode number 11, and it was on the climb to La Plana where he was conceding 2 minutes to Pedro Delgado. Delgado had always said if he beat Roche to the top by 2 minutes, he would win the Tour de France. Halfway up the climb, he had 2 minutes, and then, as almost if by magic, Stephen Roche had made a magnificent recovery. He was closing in so quickly on Delgado, he knew he'd lost the Tour de France, and Roche then answered the question we'd all asked.
And when I arrived, everybody wanted to know, where'd you come from? Everybody was asking the same questions, and nobody was kind of saying, well, can I help you, Stephen? And like La Plana is like 2,000 metres up in the sky, so the oxygen is already very scarce up there. So when you have 100 journalists all on your back asking the same questions, like there's very much oxygen left for the sport, for the athlete.
Roche's greatest attribute was always his power to recover, and he won in the time trial, and Dublin welcomed him home as a hero. There was more, and in Villach, Austria, he was the world champion, and another big moment had come.
It was, definitely a big moment, because I wasn't really, I went to the World Championships to win, but thought it was going to be it wasn't possible because, also the fact that I'd already won the Giro and the Tour, so I was a very, very marked man, and the fact then that Eddie Merckx had won the Giro and the Tour, and the world, it's only himself has won the three of them together, so if I had won the world, it's going to be like my name has gone into history,
1987 was an historic year, and the tears were ones of happiness. In 1992, he was winning a stage again at La Bouboule, but there were sad days already behind him. In 1991, the team time trial was a disaster. Roche had missed the start, was eliminated, and was very bitter. Roche had missed the start, and someone he felt should have helped him out.
If somebody had looked for me, they'd have found me, no problem. And they went off without me. There was 3 directors and 3 soigneurs, and not even one of them waited for me, or even looked for me, So, it was a big, big thing, big heartbreak for me, really,
In all, Stephen Roche has ridden the Tour de France 10 times, with a 3rd and a 1st place finish and 3 stage wins his rewards. He's always been liked by the public, especially by the French and the Irish, and he'll always be remembered by them when he retires.
But I think it'll probably hit me when I cross the line on the Champs-Élysées next Sunday. Then it will hit me that, well, it is my last tour, and we'll see what the direction is.
Stephen Roche is the only sportsman to be given the freemanship of the city of Dublin, and now stands alongside the statesman John F. Kennedy and the Pope. But the Tour de France goes on, and we're now about to enter the Pyrenees, and Stephen Roche is still very much in this, his final race. Stage 15, taking the riders over the Col de Joux. And then we leave France via the Port d'Envalira at 2,407 metres, onto the Col d'Ordino in Andorra, and then the uphill finish, the Monte de Pal at 1,840 metres. In all, 231 kilometres, and now we are deep in the heart of the Pyrenees. And the first attack of the day has come, and it's come from Richard Virenque, Oliveira Rincon and Leonardo Sierra. And the conditions here at the top of the first mountain is very, very bad indeed, but the attack is paying off. This is the top of the Col de Joux, and Virenque first over there from Rincon and Sierra. So quite clearly, 3 riders a long way down overall are trying for the long escape and hoping that Miguel Indurain will not take up the challenge as we now go on to the next big climb here, and you can see the wind. Very, very difficult racing conditions indeed. And with a tough day again in the Pyrenees tomorrow, I'm not surprised that Indurain or indeed Tony Rominger are anxious to start the attacks very early. 3 riders, 3 different nationalities. At the back here is Sierra, he comes from Venezuela. Then we have Rincon from Colombia and the Frenchman Richard Virenque. Well, we saw his RMO teammate, as he was last year, when they rode so well in this Tour de France, Pascal Lino on the attack. Now they're both on the same team again, but this time the Andorra-based Festina team. And that is probably why Richard Virenque has been told to go out early on the attack. Well, here's the carrot for the rest to follow as we climb up again towards the skyline here. And this now is the climb of the Port d'Envalira, taking them up to 2,407 metres. And Virenque is setting out the message. But at the moment, they're something like 7 minutes ahead of the field containing Indurain. Eric Boyer is chasing in between. And there he is, out on his own. The lone man now, a long way to go though, something like 6 minutes to bridge the gap up towards the leaders. But he is closing. And the GAN team not having a very good tour, the new sponsorship this year. It was formerly the Z team, of course, and Greg LeMond not starting in this year's Tour de France, so they are really a team without a leader. Jean-Francois Bernard at the front. We haven't seen too much of him in this Tour de France, but now he's trying to do his duty for Indurain, setting the pace. Indurain comfortable, waiting till we get nearer the steep climbs that come once we cross into Andorra. And here's Eric Boyer being cheered over the border. And further up the climb now, we go back up to the leaders. Rincon, the spindly legs of the man who's had a couple of good results this year, a win in a stage of the Tour of Spain and the Tour of Aragon, and indeed the Dauphiné, which is always seen as a very good training race for the upcoming Tour de France. And Colombia have waited a long time too for a good success in the Tour. Well, this is Franco Vona here now, and he's got away from the main field. And he's been joined alongside him here by Jean-Philippe Dajva from the Festina team. So quite clearly Festina's had their orders this morning to show the colours as they go home to Andorra. The only way this team could register itself in Andorra, where Festina come from, was by actually taking onto the books a lot of Andorran amateur cyclists, because of the international rules requiring the majority of the riders on the team must come from the country where the team is registered. And the majority of the top professionals, in fact, don't come from Andorra. Well, this trio has been on the attack all day today, and the gap is still there. A little discussion going on here, and it's quite clearly not in any particular language that each understands. Sierra indicating 2 there to Veronk. Veronk keeps going well. Well, Franco Vona, he was a star of the Alps 1 year ago, taking second place on both the mountain stages there. Remember him on the climb to Sestria? We saw nothing of him. The cameras followed Claudio Chiappucci and then Miguel Indurain, and up popped Franco Vona in the middle of them both, taking second place. It would be nice and just if he could win the stage today, but he's still a lot of work to do to get across to those 3 leaders. And at last the cloud has begun to lift here on the climb of the Onvalira, and Vona going clear. I can't help feeling this is the calm before the storm, and this indeed now is Rondon trying to get clear for the Gatorade team. Abelardo Rondon, he's now in fact the 5th rider on the road, chasing Sierra, Veronk, Rincon and Vono, and he's something like 3 minutes behind this trio as they go up over the top. And so Vona is the 4th rider on the road as he comes up the Onvalira, and there's the time gap, almost 3 minutes to him. And now followed by Rondon, and he is just on 3 minutes as he goes over the top. Still no signs of the big field, but we do hear that in fact Erik Breukink has been dropped by the big pack. Now the long descent, because we're now into Andorra, and the riders heading up eventually the Col d'Ordino, which is in fact a brand new road that takes them over the top. At one stage you couldn't go right over the top of the Col. Now it's a new road which will take them down into the heart of this beautiful principality, and then they'll go up the final climb of the day, and that is quite difficult to say the least. And there is what is left of the big bunch, the heads of state as it were, in the Tour de France, and still Miguel Indurain being followed very closely down there by Rominger and Zenon Jaskula. So 10 kilometers to go now to the finish, and in fact that was Richard Veronk on the final climb, and he's been dropped by Oliveira Rincon. And now the pace is being stepped up here, and it's being done in fact by the class riders, and this is Gerard Rouet setting the pace at the front on behalf of Miguel Indurain. And I would think that Indurain has told Rouet to go to the front, set a very fast tempo in the hope that Tony Rominger will not be able to lift the pace and launch an attack. Everything today, this first day in the Pyrenees, has worked out very much so far in the favour of Indurain. But this is Oliveira Rincon now. It's been a long day in the saddle for him and these two, but he's dropped them both. Sierra at the back and Veronk have been left on this last climb. So all of Colombia will be cheering this one home now as Rincon goes alone for gold. And there is quite a considerable size, in fact, that group down there, which indicates the pace has not been as hot as it might have been today, this first day in the Pyrenees. And Leonardo Sierra now being joined by Rondon. That's Rondon setting the pace at the front. And so this little group with Bona as well is coming back together in the chase. But the man who has slipped them is Oliveira Rincon for the Amaya squad and Colombia. He's concentrating very, very hard indeed. This will certainly go down as his greatest moment if he can survive to the top. And it looks now too as though, in fact, Sierra is in trouble on the climb. It is a very, very hard climb, this up to the finishing line. And Sierra has lost contact. As we move steadily up to the chase group, Rondon seems to be doing a fair share of the work, along with Bona. Richard Virenque also now content to follow, but thinking he might get a good finish for the sponsors at the top. We move a little bit further down the slopes as well. John Unzaga, as always, leading his faithful leader there, and that is the polka dot jersey of Rominger. Other class riders also trying to get to the front. Alvaro Mejia is still there and well there, retaining his second place overall. And Rue, faithful man, setting the pace on the climb here towards the finish. Well, I would expect Unzaga perhaps to launch an attack and try and lift the polka dot jersey into the front. Tony Rominger, the memories of his two great days in the Alps a few days ago. Can he repeat them in the Pyrenees? Well, there are those here that says he can't. And still they're splitting up because, in fact, it looks as though Bona has now climbed clear of Rondon and Virenque. The eternal second on the stage, as it seems. 2 second places last year. Bona now riding in the wheel tracks of Rincon. And that big bunch thinning out a little bit under the impetus there of Gerard Rue, and he's even got his name on the road as well. And now Leonardo Sierra, those legs have gone. The Venezuelan has blown up, and there, hauling him back in after a long day in the lead, is John Unzaga. Leading as ever, Tony Rominger, followed by Miguel Indurain, Alvaro Mejia, right behind Indurain. And then we'd like to see, just to be reassured he's there, is Zenon Yaskula, and then we'll have the top 4 riders overall in that league group, the top 5 in fact. Indurain, now he's gone to the front to set the pace as well. As the riders climb to the heights of Andorra, the Spanish flag though flying as well, the Basque flag that is, on the left of our picture. And there's the Spanish flag. 4 kilometres to go now. Miguel Indurain sees another difficult day. He can cross it off tonight when he goes to bed, as he keeps all of his overall lead. He started the day 3 minutes 23 seconds ahead of Mejia, 4 minutes 45 ahead of Zenon Yaskula. That will stay the same now, and the glory of the day is going to go way down south to South America and to Colombia. And Mejia has been absolutely brilliant today, and the same could be said too of Virenque and Sierra, because now they've reeled in Rondon as well. He's been caught, and they don't even look at him as Rominger goes on towards the finish now. Indurain has got his wheel. Mejia is just behind. The finish line is approaching. They won't catch up now with Rincon. But just look at the speed of these brilliant climbers. They've blown that bunch apart, and still it is Bjarne Riis of the Ariostia team who somehow is hanging on in there. Mejia, Riis, and I think the rider who's tacking on the back of them is Zenon Yaskula yet again. You can see the bandage on the knee there, the left knee of Rominger. That was the fall that he had down on the flatlands on the run-in on one of the flat stages to Perpignan, I think it was, when he fell but lost no time. And now he's just finding not the strength he had in the Alps, and indeed he wants a little bit of help from Indurain. And there is Virenque. He's been picked up now, so I think the only man left in front now is Oliveira Rincon, and if he holds it to the line, he will have been out in front for 185 kilometres. Tremendous ride. And there he is, under the 1 kilometre to go. 184 kilometres in the lead at this point. And they've wiped everybody out. At one stage, over 6 minutes behind today. The relentless pedalling of these great champions has blown away everybody else. And in fact, Bona was still there, but he's been caught now. So there is only one man in the lead now, as again Rominger looks over to Indurain. He looks around to see who else is here. He will have noted too that Mejia is here, Zenon Yaskula is here, Bjarne Riis is here. These are the riders now who are still hanging on to the high places in the Tour. The highest place reserved today, though, for the Colombian Oliveira Rincon. He'll move up the overall classification. He might squeeze a top 10 place overall, but that would be the best he could hope for. This is what he wanted, and this is his first ever stage victory in the Tour de France, and he did it the hard way. 185 kilometres in the lead for him. Now there'll be a few seconds ticking away before the rest of the riders come in. Round about 2 minutes, I think, still to go. He made a lot of good ground on this last climb of the Monte de Pau, just outside of the city of Andorra, in the Principality of Andorra. And now as they climb up towards the finishing line, Indurain and Chiappucci somehow has clawed his way back here as well. He's alongside Indurain. Now watch Rominger. Rominger's going to go for it. Indurain has spotted him. A little bit lax there, but Indurain has seen him and immediately takes his wheel, followed by Mecchia. So once again, Indurain conceding nothing to the men he fears most in this year's race. And look at that. Rominger looks across and sees what damage has been done. The answer is none at all. And Bjorn Ries still digs in deep. There's Jaskula, hangs on at the back, just about keeps them in his sights. And now can Claudio Chiappucci finish it off? Indurain has got back to the lead position, and this is a real scrabble now for the second place on the day. Final little kick around that last bend, which is the steepest, and it's all over the climbing now. It's a straight sprint for the line, and it looks as though Bjorn Ries is going to have a go for it. He's gone, Bjorn Ries, with all of the strength he can muster. Tony Rominger goes after him. Jean-Marie Leblanc there watching over, the director of the Tour de France. He's seeing now a great sprint from a man we wouldn't expect to see doing it here. Bjorn Ries goes for it, but the challenge comes to Rominger, and Rominger is going to get second. He was robbed of winning another mountain stage in this race by the Colombian, but he makes the best of the rest. Second place for Tony Rominger, ahead of Bjorn Ries, Jaskula, Mecchia, Indurain. They're all there in a great finish, but Indurain, who comes in, and now he knows another day has gone by in the Tour when they haven't approached his leader's yellow jersey. A pat on the back there too for Oliveira Rincon from the great champion. Well, here's a rider who suffered again today. Gianni Bugno losing 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Most definitely now is out of this year's Tour de France. And over 4 minutes lost too, sadly, by Andy Hampsten of Motorola. Rincon winning the stage by 1 minute and 50 seconds from Rominger, Bjorn Ries, Zenon Jaskula and Miguel Indurain. But the flowers of the day, and they're big enough too, aren't they, going to the arms of Oliveira Rincon, who has put Colombia on top. Overall, though, no change at all after this first day in the Pyrenees. The same time gaps existing as they were at the start. Mecchia, Jaskula, Rominger and Ries is still there, albeit 10 minutes and 26 seconds back. In the King of the Mountains competition, a clear lead now for Rominger over Rincon, who climbed up to second place today, ahead of Miguel Indurain and Claudio Chiappucci. And after the rest day in Andorra, the riders now preparing for the ride back into France over the high mountains of the Pyrenees again, including the Benaguia. And then they will re-enter France as they climb up over the top of the Col de Portillon at nearly 1,300 metres. And the finish via the Col de Peyresourde, down in the valley, and the long climb up to Saint-Laury-Soulon on the Pla d'Adet climb. It really is a tough day today, and this the last real chance the riders have of attacking Miguel Indurain, and Tony Rominger knows it, the leader in the King of the Mountains. And this is the riders now as they head out through the beautiful Pyrenees. You see there are easier ways to go through the Pyrenees than by bicycle, and the milkman taking time out. And the top of the first climb of the day, and it is a sprint finish, and it is in fact Tony Rominger snatching it on the line there as Rominger goes over. But this is the Col de Portillon. The riders now coming back into France the hard way. Goodbye to Spain. And the rider at the front again is Tony Rominger, storing those points now for the King of the Mountains competition, which will assure him of a place on the podium in Paris. But he would love the yellow jersey, there's no doubt about that. And so the riders now heading through Luchon, where the feeding station is today. And the only way out of Luchon, for those of you that know it, when you go down there by bicycle, is usually uphill, because the great climbs surround it. And this is now the entry onto the Col de Peyresourde. And the attack has come from Claudio Chiappucci, and with him now is Massimo Girotto. Well, Girotto has won a couple of stages in the Tour de France, but this will go down in the books if he managed to pull this one off. Robert Miller here setting the pace nicely. But these two gradually pulling clear at the moment. Well, Claudio Chiappucci has had his good days and his bad days in this year's Tour de France, and it could well be that today will be a good one. Very often the day after the rest day, riders do have a bad patch, and Miguel Indurain anxious not to have one right now, because he's on the lower slopes of the Col de Peyresourde, and the crowd's decided this is where they want to be. Magnificent crowd here. And now the main field is fragmenting as they settle down to chase Claudio Chiappucci and Massimo Garotto. They've desperately tried to delay the attacks today, because the last climb of the day, the Pla d'Adet, is a very, very difficult climb indeed. It winds at the back of Saint-Louis-Soulon, this beautiful village which nestles on the Spanish frontier, but on the French side, and the climb itself goes up round the back of the village, and it literally goes to nowhere. The easiest way to go and see the top is by cable car, but the riders won't have that luxury today. Over the top of the Peyresourde, another 15 kilometres of climbing in the legs, and Chiappucci and Girotto go over the top together. Zenon Jascul is still up with this leading group as well. Alberto Conti is here, so too Rominger, not surprisingly. Mejia. There's Jascula again, notching on in what we often call the ticket collector's position at the back of the lead group, watching all of the moves again. Well, after the riders came into Andorra, which is now 2 days ago, Indurain, Mejia, Jascula, Rominger was the situation overall. Now we're on the way down. Look at that. Just on the edge of 70 kilometres an hour on the way off the Col de Peyresourde. Chiappucci, we've never quite known when to write him off in this year's Tour de France, but one thing's for certain, I don't think. In any case, now there'll be a top 3 position for him in Paris. He's lost too much time, and it looks as though he's going to have to surrender now, along with Girotto, to the group that's coming up. Well, it looks to be a group of some 15 to 20 riders who are coming together as they now head on to the Pla d'Adet climb, and the first rider to lose ground here, Girotto. At the start of this climb, a massive crowd. They've paid to line this mountain today all the way to the summit. And now it looks once again as though the class rider, Tony Rominger, is going to launch an attack. He's waiting for the climb. It's all or nothing here. They've picked up a tailwind, in fact, on this climb, and Indurain grits his teeth and goes with the only man he cares about yet again. He knows now if he can be alongside Tony Rominger at the top of this mountain, then he will go on to win the Tour de France. There'll be no doubt about that. But Indurain is not the smooth pedalling man now. He's gritting his teeth as he tries to hold on to Rominger. That's Mejia trying to get on turns behind. Hasn't got the acceleration of Rominger though, but he'll try and come back, that's for sure. As Rominger, the Swiss rider who's brought so much to this, only his 3rd Tour de France this year, and the last 2 years the winner of the Tour of Spain. And Miguel Indurain, his big frame there, weighs something like 76 kilograms, and he's hanging on now. And he really is hanging on as well, because Rominger is stretching him. Rominger is most certainly stretching him now on this long climb, this climb that was first held in the Tour de France back in 1974 when Raymond Poulidor was the stage winner then. We've seen Lucien Van Impe win here twice. In 1976 he springboarded here to his final victory in Paris as well. And it's fitting to note that Van Impe is now commentating here for Belgian television as well. And also other winners on the climb, Zoetemelk, Joop Zoetemelk in 1975, who won the Tour in 1980. Mariano Martinez went on to win the King of the Mountains. He triumphed here in 78. And Beat Breu in 1982. 82 was the last time. Here's Robert Miller. Miller, I think, really wanted to be in on the move today, but he's missed the jump by Rominger when he swung into the tailwind. And so too Claudio Chiappucci in a little bit of trouble now. This is a vicious, vicious climb. It's very steep. It's much steeper, in fact, this climb, than Alpe d'Huez, which we've missed out this year on the Tour de France. And Zenon Jascula is also climbing back into the picture. They can't get rid of this pole this year. Zenon Jascula is coming back into the picture as he climbs onto the back wheel of Robert Miller. They're the leaders just ahead. Well, Jascula is having an absolutely magnificent Tour de France. He's not the rider I would ever have prophesied would have been up in the top 3 at this stage of the race. He's a good time trial rider. He won a stage, the time trial stage, indeed, in the Tour of Switzerland. And that was the mountain time trial, but these are bigger mountains. Mejia, there we are, 2nd overall this morning at 3:23, where he's been for days. And now he too is having to fight back. He's having a bad day. Well, the fact that the spectator can run at least for a little while alongside these two leaders will give you some idea just how steep this climb is. But what a magnificent ride by Zenon Jaskula. Now, the face of Miguel Indurain, wearing glasses today, so you can't see what his eyes are obviously feeling because there's pain in those eyes today. And Jaskula has joined them. Riding his blue Bianchi bicycle, Zenon Jaskula joins the two leaders. And now we have a Polish rider, a Spaniard and a Swiss rider. The Pole lives in Italy, the Swiss rider lives in Monaco, and the Spaniard lives in Spain. So are we now seeing the top three finishes in this year's Tour de France get together at the front? Robert Millar there, not too happy with the proximity of our television cameras. He rides on, and it looks as though Mecchia is trying to recover. Either that or Millar is going backwards. But still, Tony Rominger is stepping on the pedals to try and rid himself. He knows this is his final chance, the last chance he's got to get rid of Miguel Indurain today. We're in the mountains again tomorrow with the Col de Tourmalet, but they're too near the beginning of the stage. A long flat road into Pau tomorrow. And that was a glimpse of Stephen Roche, who's climbing the mountain very, very well. Struggling a bit there, but he's well up with the leaders. And there is Roche, and he's coming through the field very strongly indeed. Stephen Roche, he's catching up to Millar and Mecchia. Look at this, the grand old man, the 1987 winner, is coming back. Roche is having a great day today. Rominger looks on both sides to see just how many is here. The second time he couldn't believe it. I think it's the first time he spotted Zenon Jaskula has joined him. He'll be unhappy about that, because at the moment Rominger has to find from somewhere a minute to climb over Jaskula, and Jaskula has climbed right back into the action. And the crowd have waited a long time up the mountain today to see the Battle of Pla d'Adet behind Saint-Lary-Soulan. The riders come into the town and then they swing right and they start the climb, and for a long time from the town you can see the little heads of the riders as they begin to disappear away into the mountain. 4 kilometers to go to the top. Time is running out for Tony Rominger, certainly so too for Zenon Jaskula. And look at this, Hampsten in fact has come up to Mecchia, and Mecchia has hit the wall. Now Andy Hampsten, the leader of Motorola, now being forced to nurse the new leader of the team because of his riding in these last couple of weeks. Mecchia is now being nursed by Andy Hampsten. And that has given a chance here for Roche to carry on his attack. Roche is climbing up now, he's in 4th place on the climb. And this is a very, very inspired ride by the Dubliner. At last we're seeing pain on the man that everybody thought wasn't human. The winner of the Tour for the last 2 years, Miguel Indurain, is now hanging on, but he's not conceding a single second to Tony Rominger. Roche is coming all of the time. Nice to see Roche's face too, because he really is trying. There it is. Stephen Roche riding his last Tour de France. He's not going to go out with a poor season. He's had a great Tour of Italy, and now he's living well in the Tour de France. 1 kilometre to go. 3 riders we've come to know these last couple of weeks, especially in the mountains, are still together towards the end of the last real mountain stage of this year's Tour de France. Tomorrow the mountains are near the start. And Roche is still coming. He's under the kilometre to go banner. I'm afraid the chance of a stage victory is gone, although you can see the tail of the vehicles behind the 3 leaders, and he's nearly on them. Now what is Tony Rominger going to do? He's been forced to set the pace. He said it well. He's hurt Indurain, but Indurain has not cracked. Indurain has proved to us today that he's not just a great champion who finds it easy, he suffers like the rest of them. And still, Hampsten nursing Mecchia, hopefully to retain his 2nd place overall. Jaskula, ridden well on the lower slopes of Pla d'Adet to join the 2 front-runners halfway up. And look at that crowd. A corridor of noise now as the top 3 riders of this year's Tour come towards their summit. Rominger knows it's all down to him. Jaskula has never offered anything in setting the pace since this Tour began. He's content to follow now. Rominger has got no more. And look at Roche. Roche is coming back. Shades of La Plana when he came back on Delgado. But it won't be quick enough. It won't be quick enough. And in fact, Zenon Jaskula has gone. Jaskula has gone. He's waited and waited and he's jumped, and in fact I don't think Rominger's got it. He hasn't indeed. Zenon Jaskula for Poland gets the stage win. Rominger again is second. 2 second places in the mountains now to match the 2 first of the Alps, and Stephen Roche is going to make it in 4th place, and Stephen is absolutely delighted about that. 4th place finish for Roche and an acceleration up the overall classification tonight. Robert Miller, who wanted so much to win in the Alps and didn't, he's now lost his chance in the Pyrenees as well. And Hampsten today has been the perfect teammate as he brings home Alvaro Mejia, and he may well have saved his 2nd place there. This was the sprint and this was the attack by Zenon Jaskula, who has ridden a great Tour de France and is without doubt the surprise of this year's Tour. And now he gets here Poland's first ever stage victory. He worked for it too. He may not have worked up the climb, but he had to chase to catch up these 2 riders, and they are the best men in the world. We must never forget that. And then he managed to recuperate enough to provide the strength for the jump to take the stage win ahead of Tony Rominger and Miguel Indurain. And so we've seen Lech Piasecki as the only yellow jersey for Poland back in 1987. Now we see this man as the first ever stage winner. Jaskula then wins the stage. Overall, Mejia does keep 2nd, Jaskula 3rd, Rominger is 4th. The last day in the Pyrenees, stage 17, it begins with the Col de Tourmalet, and then it moves on to the Col d'Aubisque, and then it's all downhill to the finish in Pau, 117 miles. And this is the town of La Mongie on the Col de Tourmalet, and there's trouble already today for Miguel Indurain. He's under pressure. Tony Rominger has attacked. And Rominger has forced the pace very early on, and for the first time in this year's Tour de France, he has slipped Miguel Indurain. Indurain might well be feeling that there is plenty of time left, and Claudio Chiappucci trying to ride clear here. It's Julian Gorospe who's setting the pace alongside Miguel Indurain there and Mejia. But this is now really an audacious move by Tony Rominger, and Claudio Chiappucci wants a slice of the action. There he is, alongside him, Zenon Jaskula, who's turning out now to be quite a surprise in this Tour. He's won his stage and he's climbing for a high finish in Paris. Now the thing is, and the only problem with the stage today is these mountains come so soon after the start. There's some 75 miles to the finish when they've gone over the top of the Col d'Aubisque. They're going to have to make some time now, because if Indurain reorganises himself, there'll be plenty of time to save the Tour de France, but at least Rominger now is proving that Indurain can be outmanoeuvred. There he is, Miguel Indurain, Gorospe, and they've brought back Claudio Chiappucci, who's back in that chase group. So there's real fireworks on the Col de Tourmalet today. Last night the riders were saying this climb was too early. Well, maybe. Tony Rominger thought that's what they all think. There's Mejia, tucked in behind the 2, and it's all down to the Banesto riders now, and there's only one here can help him out, and that's Julian Gorospe. And my goodness me, look at the face of Miguel Indurain now. For the first time, he's lost the shelter of the back wheel of Tony Rominger. Massimo Girotto is here, just in front of Claudio Chiappucci. And they're all prepared now to let the big man in yellow do the work. Franco Vona, Andy Hampsten. These are the riders in what is left of this 2nd group on the road now. And Robert Miller just hanging on to the back of the train. Very familiar squat style of Robert as he sits there pedaling a low gear. Let's go back up to the top, because this is where it's all happening now. Zenon Jaskula now prepared to help on the attack here, as in fact he leads Tony Rominger. Rominger just bounced off one of the crowd there as we come up towards the top of the Col de Tourmalet. There's no doubt now either that Tony Rominger will be the king of the mountains in this year's Tour de France, and that is a significant prize indeed. And John Anzaga was there too on the way up the climb. Just look at this crowd here on the top of probably the most famous climb in the Tour de France, the Col de Tourmalet. It was introduced the very first time the Tour went into the Pyrenees, when everybody thought that the organisers were far too cruel. But without the Pyrenees now, it wouldn't be a Tour de France, and it was only just a little bit in the Pyrenees with the Marie Blanc last year, and nobody liked that. The Battle of the Tourmalet, as Anzaga comes up to the top now. And Oliveira Rincon, a little tap on the shoulder there. Well, I think it was a tap anyway. As they sprinted out at the top, then comes the chase group. Look at the gap, 49 seconds, 50 seconds. Indurain has conceded. He has never lost that sort of time at this stage of any Tour de France where he's been the winner these last 3 years. And the rider now has escaped on his own. So we're on the descent of the Col de Tourmalet, and Tony Rominger is versus the rest of the race. The one man he wanted to shed, he's done it. He's got 50 seconds at the top. And what a shame he's not descending to the finish now, and he isn't. It's a long way down the Col de Tourmalet. It's a very good descent for the pure descender as well. And then you run off, and then you start the climb of the Col de Bisque. An awful lot to ask, even for the Swiss climber as well. This is the chase down. Riders beginning to pull themselves back together. Looks like it might well be Bjarne Riis who's got himself to the front of that descending group. There's the long descent of the Tour. Well, not for the nervous. A little flick to the right. It's a long way down. And there isn't really much else that Rominger can do but freewheel down the hill. He can't pedal any faster. This is the main field going over. They must be asking themselves what happened today, because they had a right to feel this race wouldn't have fragmented like it has done, because the Tourmalet was so soon in the stage. But in fact, Rominger has come out fighting today. And well, look at this. Out of sight of our cameras, in fact, Indurain has used the power of his descent to rejoin Rominger at the front. He has nullified 50 seconds here, and we're only halfway down the descent of the Col de Tourmalet. And I think today Miguel Indurain has won the Tour de France by what has been a great risk on the descent of the Tourmalet. He's looking over his shoulder there to see just who else is coming up, but the main field also now is regrouping at the back. Well, the tornado has blown itself out by the look of it, and Indurain has got himself back in the driving seat. Claudio Chiappucci now, a rider still anxious to do something in this Tour de France. He's now on the attack as we start the climb here of the Col de Bisque, and that's John Unzaga who's with him. He's the policeman, in fact, for the class team, and the other rider is Massimo Garotto. This will be the second group on the road. Indurain now alongside Tony Rominger. And that's what he wants. And a drink coming up. No, there isn't, for Claudio Chiappucci. Now Chiappucci on the climb of the Col de Bisque. This was where Stephen Roach won his first ever stage of the Tour de France. Happy memories for him. Going back a few years now, as we go back to the main field here, and the Banesto riders are getting themselves back in control at the front. Gerard Rouet on the right of our picture, I think indicating there to keep the tempo nice and steady, because these three riders out front do not affect their man Miguel Indurain. Up towards the summit now of the Col de Bisque, Claudio Chiappucci wins the last big mountain climb of this year's Tour. He goes over the summit, and the main field have reorganized themselves with all of the riders in the leadership of the classification almost together. Mecchia on the wheel is Zenon Jaskula. Then in front of him is Tony Rominger, and in front of him is Miguel Indurain. Over the top in the mist of the Col de Bisque, and look at the gap. They're not interested, are they, in Claudio Chiappucci? 5 minutes and 19 seconds down. He would never have got away with a move like that a year ago. Still a long, long way to go into the city of Pau, which this time will take the riders away from the mountains. So often it is the gateway to the Pyrenees. We now move on into the streets of Pau, and these three riders have no fear of the field behind. It's only a question of who will win the sprint. John Unzaga is in that group. The Ariostia team now, they're thinking more of keeping Bjarne Riis high up, because Claudio Chiappucci could endanger Riis's 5th place overall. And it's up to them now to bring this peloton back into reasonable distance of Chiappucci, and they know it. And so while they try to bring them back at least into sight, Claudio Chiappucci, Girotto and Unzaga will think of the stage win. There's the kite as we now swing up in towards the square in the city of Pau. Unzaga has done so much work in this year's Tour in the service of his team leader, Tony Rominger. Now, can he win the stage? There's the Ariostia riders trying to keep the race together and bring them closer. And look at this, they've shut down. Now, this is going to help Bjarne Riis keep his 5th place overall for sure. Watch Claudio Chiappucci here, lying off the back and waiting. Massimo Girotto is worried about him. In fact, only Unzaga has never won a stage in previous Tours de France. The other two riders have struck twice each. And in fact, it's quite clear that Girotto is more concerned about Chiappucci than he is about John Unzaga, and that's why Unzaga started the sprint. He's gone early, though. It's still a little way to go into the finishing line. Unzaga, though, still has the lead now. Massimo Girotto searches for the gear lever, finds the gear, goes. And now Girotto goes and Chiappucci coming on our right. They're neck and neck to the line. And Claudio Chiappucci is edging this. He gets it. Claudio Chiappucci has won what really is a flat stage of the Tour de France here. And there is Bjorn Riis coming home next. And that will save him his 5th place overall on the classification in the Tour, as the rest of the field are brought home safe and sound. Max Chiandri not too far away off the sprint there. Chiappucci wins the stage from Girotto and Unzaga, Riis and Yekimov. Overall, Indurain still leads Mecchia, Jaskula and Rominger. Bordeaux next stop, where amateur Chris Boardman was setting the hour record. Inside 1 minute to go for Boardman. The clock is counting it down. The record he's aimed for is gone. 51.596. 904 centimetres, that was the record of Graham O'Brien, and in 6 days have passed by. Chris Boardman has come here knowing he's had to beat a friend and a rival to take the most coveted record in the sport. Chris Boardman could now become the first rider to break the 52 kilometres barrier. There will be a count back, but it's a record and there's no doubt about that. The gunner's gone. Chris Boardman is now the holder of the most coveted cycling record in the world.
That was an unbelievable ride today. Did you think this morning that you were going to take it by so much?
Well, actually, we were hoping to take it by a lot more, but because of the humidity, it's nearly 80%, because of the rain outside, it was just too hot, so I had to slow down, or this Janto was going to faint.
But even so, Chris Boardman becomes the first man ever to beat 52 kilometres an hour, and that is magnificent. But the Tour de France has had a quieter day, 125 miles from Orthez, and the sprinters are now going to fight it out here at Bordeaux, just a few hundred yards from where Boardman has set that magnificent record. Brian Holm on the left, and in fact that is Frans Maassen in the centre, but here he comes, Jamaluddin Abdu-Japarov on the right. And Jamaluddin has sat up a little bit early, but he's going again, and he gets it quite clearly on the line. The second stage win for Abdu-Japarov, who now looks set to take his green jersey to Paris for the 2nd time in 3 years. Look at Frankie Andreu nearest the camera here, claiming 2nd place, and that's a great finish for him as well. On the eve of the last time trial, no change overall. And the last time trial, 48 kilometres or 30 miles, taking the riders from Bretigny-sur-Orge to Montlhéry. And we're not too far away from Paris. The riders coming up here by train. And now a concentration on Tony Rominger, hoping to claim a place on the podium in the top 3 in Paris. Barbara Mecchia knows that his 2nd place is still in doubt. He's not the world's best time trialist at all, and Tony Rominger can be among them on his day. And look at this, 51 kilometres an hour. He's set the target now. It's not like it was at Lake de Madine when he started in atrocious weather way down the field in 87th place. And Miguel Indurain now is going to have to slip into top gear very, very quickly indeed. Rominger is doing a stormer. He's now caught Bjorn Riis and passed him at 3 minutes. And Mecchia going over the top at that point. 12th position only for him there. Now, I wonder what, in fact, Miguel Indurain is doing. The man who has proved unbeatable in the distant time trials over the last 3 years of the Tour de France. Jaskula living up to his name as a time trialist. He's the best time. Now he's dropping away. Indurain is out of it. Look at this. Miguel Indurain, only the 3rd best time here, and has conceded already 45 seconds to Tony Rominger. Well, are we witnessing here a surprise at the very end of this year's Tour de France? Rominger not dreaming now of winning it, but what a coup if he could beat Miguel Indurain. There is Zenon Jaskula, and this is Tony Rominger. And Rominger proving as he comes to the end of this year's Tour, he is still very, very strong indeed. The king of the mountains, 10 kilometres to go now for Zenon Jaskula, the big surprise this year, aiming for a place on the podium in Paris. And a puncture to Rominger, and a quick change, and it looks as though our cameras only just caught it, but that looked like a very good change indeed. Rominger immediately back into his rhythm. Well, that was very, very unfortunate. All of the checks are indicating that Tony Rominger is clear of Miguel Indurain, now at the 10 kilometres to go point. The big man being beaten in a time trial? We're about to find out. There's the best time on the board. Johan Bruneel is in. The winner of the fastest stage in the history of the Tour is home. He's now down to 2nd place, though. 57.02 for the 30 miles for Tony Rominger. Now the arrival of Jaskula. Jaskula comes in, and his time is now second best. He's dropped behind Tony Rominger. He concedes 1 minute and 48 seconds. And now, as we roll towards the end of the time trial, in fact, Indurain has caught Alvaro Mejia for 3 minutes, and it could be that Mejia is now losing for sure that second place overall. The entourage is behind the man in yellow, but this time it's not to be the winner. Look at the time on the left, and that is the winning time of the day for Tony Rominger. Miguel Indurain has been beaten in a time trial in the Tour de France for the first time in 3 years, if you don't count the prologue. And now Indurain comes home. He's going to be just a little bit better than Jaskula on the line, but only by about 5 seconds. He concedes 42 seconds to Tony Rominger, the winner, and here's Paul with him.
You said before the start this morning that you wanted to do a fine performance today. Are you surprised by your performance of today's time trial?
Yes, I'm happy that I did win this race, because you never know it really after 3 weeks if you are so strong to do it. I told me now you have to go and take a high speed, and I didn't. Yes, I heard my reference times of the other, but I couldn't change the speed then. I know now when we are going like that until to arrive, you can win it, and that was very good for me.
Indeed it was. Tony Rominger up to second, Mejia down from second to fourth. After the time trial, the last stage from Vitry-Châtillon to Paris, the race starting outside of the Matin-Réveil, where all of the tours began back in 1903. And it's come down now to the battle of the sprinters on the Champs-Élysées. And the race is coming to an end now, and it looks at last as though Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov is going to try and hunt for the victory. He's coming out from the right there. This is where he crashed 2 years ago when in green, and that's what he doesn't want this time. But this time, Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov makes it a fairy tale ending to this Tour de France for him. He gets the victory, he gets the green jersey, but it's Miguel Indurain in the centre of the peloton who comes home for the third successive year as the winner of the Tour de France, and he's won it so well, but there were moments when he wasn't so sure. And so Indurain, again on the Champs-Élysées, is the final wearer of the yellow jersey on what has been an extremely good Tour de France. Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov, this sprint giving him 3 stage wins in this year's race as well. And the best stage finish for Frédéric Moncassin, and for Stephen Roche it really is the end. Stephen, the Champs-Élysées for the last time. You've had some great memories here and some very sad ones. I mean, what do you feel like now?
Well, I felt great out of everyone started saying it's the last one. So that's...
You're never going to come back, you're not going to ride next year. Remember 87?
You do, of course, but you've always good and bad memories, but they're all part of the career.
So you know exactly how Miguel Indurain feels today?
You see now how I feel.
You know exactly how you feel. Stephen, you've given us 10 great years. And so an emotional Stephen Roche, who finished 13th in this year's Tour de France. Miguel Indurain, again the winner by almost 5 minutes from Rominger. Jaskula taking 3rd place, and some surprises there in the top 5 finishes, not least Bjarne Riis of Denmark in 5th slot. But no doubt about the winner yet again, Miguel Indurain. Tony Rominger will take heart. He might beat him next year. This has been a great race. So there we are, after 3 weeks of extremely good cycling. At first it seemed Miguel Indurain was going to be a very solid leader and win this race by many, many minutes. In the end though, Tony Rominger did come good. What a shame he lost that time in those early time trials. Otherwise, Big Mig might have had his hands full over these last few days. It's been a different type of Tour de France. It's found the usual type of winner, Miguel Indurain. He's won 3 now, like Lewis Mbowbe and Eddy Merckx. Will he make it 4 next year? Well, we'll tell you on FCV on next year's video. Until then, I'm Phil Liggett saying goodbye. And we hope you have enjoyed this famous Cycling Videos presentation, which has been made possible in part by Bianchi, the greatest name in Italian frame building. Their factory near Bergamo has produced hand-built frames for the greatest names: Fausto Coppi, Giro and Tour de France winner and the former World Hour record holder, and Felice Gimondi, Giro and Tour winner and the world champion, just like Gianni Bugno, the last 2 years the world road race champion. And the new names, Zenon Jaskula, third in the Tour de France, Mario Cipollini, a stage winner and yellow jersey. There have been more, and there will be many more. Bianchi, a company which builds the best, helps you be the best, and has helped us view the best. Thank you.